What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz and Zach. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. We're going to go over our Week 9 wide receiver rankings, our Week 9 tight end rankings. But first, we're going to go over a bunch of news, a bunch of injury news to best prepare you going into the weekend, going into Week 9. We're also going to go over Thursday Night Football, last night's game. A lot closer game than we thought it was going to be, Zach, throughout the
100%.
first three quarters. And, Preciser, right? Like, they were onto something there, right, with their prediction, right?
Yeah.
Like, remember, like, they thought the Texans were only going to lose by 1 point. It was 21-17 going into the fourth quarter. And, they ended up, I think the spread was 14 going into the game.
Yeah.
And it's funny because what happened at the end of the game, heavily affected betting outcomes, right? If you betted on the over, you got it because of that last minute penalty, right? That allowed them to go for 2 and then, all that. So it was definitely an interesting outcome yesterday for a lot of people. And, everybody who was like, oh man, it's not going to hit the over. And then all of a sudden that 1 point makes a huge difference.
Right.
But going over that game real quick, man, Dallas Goedert, huge game. Went 8 for 100 and a touchdown. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith's nights were a lot quieter, especially in that first half. A.J. Brown ended up getting done that third quarter with that touchdown, but only 8 targets combined for those two. And out of the 8 games the Eagles have played this year, Devontae Smith has had 5 games of under 50 receiving yards. Okay,
Yeah.
So at this point, about halfway through their season, would you say that Devontae Smith is still a top 24 receiver the rest of the way, or is he creeping into wide receiver 3 territory?
I'm not sure he ever kind of escaped, that wide receiver 3 territory. I don't think he's a low end or, like mid wide receiver 3. I think he's a high end wide receiver 3 just because this is a good offense and they're airing it out a lot more, like we said. We wanted them to this season. But outside of that 30-point game where he scored the touchdown, he was just like, he turned into Randy Moss for a week. It's been pretty middle of the pack output. He had that one game too against Arizona where he got targeted 11 times. But outside of those 2 games, he's never eclipsed more than 8 targets in a game. I haven't moved him up too far. I wasn't really a big fan of him coming into the season because we know A.J. Brown will do his thing and he'll get targets. But it looked good earlier in the season, but he's kind of, leveled off at this point. That upside, he hasn't really been able to capitalize on that these past few weeks. It's not to say they can't do it again. He's definitely talented enough to have more explosive games, but I'm not sure how many of those are going to be down the stretch. As long as they're in these positive game scripts, they didn't have to throw that much, even though it was a closer game than we thought it might be. They're running the ball well and, pretty much on demand. They could do whatever they wanted to in the run game. And obviously, Dallas Goedert having a big day didn't help his case, but that's just the way it's going to be with this offense. There's so many weapons, only so many can have those big days. And it just hasn't been Devontae Smith's day these past few weeks.
Yeah, and this was a tougher matchup for him, but and he does have a way better matchup next week against the Commanders, and I'll probably be all over him next week, and I'll probably rank him in the top 24. But it's definitely been iffy and been up and down for him because he only gave you 4.2 points in the PPR last night, and that's not his lowest output of the season. Okay, he had a 0-point game against Detroit in Week 1.
Yeah,
don't forget that. Dameon Pierce had 27 carries for 139 yards. He wasn't targeted in this game. However, he did run around on 60% of dropbacks. He did run again as the primary 2-minute back, which is exactly what we wanted to see over the last 2 weeks. That's what's been going on. And 78% of snaps. That's exactly what you want. And dude, at this point, I think he's a top 12 running back rest of the season. Like, I don't know how else to slice it. This is the usage that you want to see out of a guy like him.
I think that you can call him a top 12 running back. I think he's low top 12, and that's just because, the usage is that of an elite running back, maybe, the snap participation is even more encouraging than the usage. Obviously, he ran all those routes, but he didn't get any targets. But the thing that kind of reared its ugly head for me that I, talked about, I think it was 2 days ago on the podcast, regarding his upside is the touchdowns. He had 27 carries, 139 yards. That's really good. I think that's averaging 5 yards a carry on 27 carries. That's great. And you saw the way he was running the whole night. Not only was he the primary 2-minute back, he was the primary offensive weapon. That's just what he does. They were going to run the offense through him, and it was shameless at that point. They just hand it to him over and over and over. I think it was 5 plays in a row on the one drive. They just kept handing him the ball, and that was when he broke off that 36-yard run. But he looked really good. It's just the touchdowns weren't there, and that was my concern. That he get all this usage, and it's pretty much empty calories. I think that's what we talked about. 139 yards, really nice output on the ground, but without a touchdown, that doesn't amount to much, especially if you're not getting those catches or those targets either. This is where I said, that the ceiling would come into play because of the offense he's on. I think this could continue to haunt him in the future. I do expect him to do a lot better, in the touchdown department moving forward, but this is just kind of, it's like both worlds where obviously you were buying Dameon Pierce, because the usage is obviously there, but I was a little bit leery because of the touchdown. So we kind of got, both of us got a little vindication there.
I guess so. But like he almost had a touchdown if they decided not to throw it at the 2-yard line, right? Like he was right there. They could have just handed the ball off to him, but instead they threw it to the tight end for the touchdown.
Yeah.
And
what was his name? It wasn't even to like a Brevin Jordan or somebody that you might have picked up on the waiver wire. Just one catch on the night.
Tegan Quitoriano.
Yeah.
That's his Quitoriano.
Did you ever see those that segment? I forget they used to do it. It was like, that helps nobody. It's like, yeah. That's 100% what that was.
Exactly. And it could have helped Dameon Pierce a lot if he had that touchdown. At least would have satisfied you. But listen, man, 60% of dropbacks running around on that, getting the 2-minute offense, that's what matters to me. Over him not getting 0 targets. So he is an every down back at this point, and I love it. Like he didn't get the targets in this game, but I'm expecting moving forward. I think this is more of an exception because of the fact that he's running so many routes and hasn't got targeted. So I'm expecting that numbers to go up, and I'm assuming that number will go up just based on the number of routes that he's running in his role. I'm looking at that more than the actual number of targets he got, but 0 targets, like that's not what you want to see. But hopefully moving forward, he's able to get some targets going his way.
Yeah.
Let's see what else happened in this game. That's about it, really.
Was
Miles Sanders was able to do his thing too, like we talked about.
Yeah, it was a quiet fantasy night. Just outside of, I'd say, Dallas Goedert. That might end up being the tight end 1 performance this week, unless Travis Kelce does his thing. But
Travis Kelce, or do you mean the real tight end 1 this week, Isaiah Likely?
Yeah. We'll see. Maybe, I don't know. But do we know if Mark Andrews is playing yet? I guess we'll talk about it.
He hasn't practiced as of yet, and that's a good thing to get. Let's just get right into it, man. Like he hasn't. We'll get into the news now. Mark Andrews is not practicing. Likely might get some run anyway, right? Rashad Bateman. Let's talk about it now. Rashad Bateman out for the season.
Yeah.
With a season-ending Lisfranc Frank surgery. That's not good. Hopefully he can revive his career, right? Like you never want to go through a Lisfranc surgery because that could have some lingering effects. Hopefully he'll be fine for his career. Hopefully this doesn't affect his career or his dynasty stock too much. That sucks for this offense. It sucks for Lamar Jackson, right? I would guess the primary beneficiary here would likely be Devin Duvernay. He's probably like an upside flex play rest of season, maybe a lone wide receiver 3 at times, depending on bye weeks and stuff. But I'd make sure he's rostered. He probably is in your league. I'd make sure Isaiah Likely's rostered too, regardless of whether Mark Andrews is playing or not. Like, at this point, so they assume Rashad Bateman was going to be back. So why make any permanent changes? But now they don't have anybody, dude. Like, why not run both these guys at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Andrews and Likely, because those are their best options. And we saw like no matter what quarterback is in there, they've shown rapport with Isaiah Likely because he just open all the time. So Likely might get some extra run regardless. And, I'm not sure if Andrews plays, if I'm going to play Likely this week, but I want to see how it all plays out and see what the Ravens do from a personnel standpoint, because now without Rashad Bateman, they're going to have to make some permanent changes here.
Yeah. And if you picked up Isaiah Likely, you're at a point where he can really only appreciate, assuming he doesn't get injured, in terms of his value. It's only going to go up from this point, I think. You look at the receivers they have to pick up the slack, with Rashad Bateman being out. They were anticipating him being back, and obviously they've been getting by without him. They've been doing all right, but is Devin Duvernay, Demarcus Robinson, James Prochet, you're going to have one of them line up as have one of them on the field at all times? Like, I'd rather have, a 2 tight end set with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely out there over any of those receivers, which you just kind of mentioned. But Isaiah Likely, like we also talked about this too. He's a receiver in like tight end body. He's always open, and he's going to be a good pass catcher for you, regardless of where he lines up from. He could line up out wide. He can also line up in line. It doesn't matter where he's going to be. He's going to be able to get that separation. So I like Isaiah Likely as an asset at this point. Like I said, I think his value can only go up. It's gone up a little bit already, especially with Mark Andrews being out and him taking advantage of the work that he got last week. He's shown that he is, and I keep calling him this, the only tight end handcuff really right now in fantasy football. And if Mark Andrews misses time, you could have yourself, a locked in, top 5 tight end, which hard to come by these days.
For sure. Another guy who's not practicing for them, Gus Edwards. And Kenyon Drake would be the play for me in his place as a low-end RB2. This team is banged up, dude. Like, this offense is banged up. And it's going to, at the end of the day, it's going to affect Lamar Jackson, too. Lamar Jackson's going to have a high floor, but his ceiling, it's going to be tough to come by. And we've seen that. He hasn't hit that ceiling, since the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I'm surprised kind of that, I'm not saying that the Ravens should have moved for a receiver. Obviously at that point, before the trade deadline, they assumed Rashad Bateman was going to be back, but, they could really use some help right now. I'm thinking, if it comes down to it and they keep having rough performances, I don't think I'd rule out maybe, Odell Beckham Jr. might go there. So that would be a name I'm looking at. Obviously, Odell could go anywhere at this point, but he might fit there in Baltimore, I think, with Lamar Jackson. It seems like
he should.
It seems like a spot I could see that happening. That's just me. So maybe if things go poorly for Lamar these next 2 weeks, something happens there. There's always that chance that they could add somebody through free agency. But yeah, you're absolutely right. With Lamar Jackson, his ceiling is going to be, we're not going to be having those 40-point performances, I don't think, anytime soon.
Cam Akers is back with the Rams. He's practicing in full, and he's claiming that none of that was on him. But in terms of how this backfield shakes out, I'm avoiding the whole thing.
Yeah.
No Darrell Henderson in my lineup. No Cam Akers in my lineup. No adult film star Ronnie Rivers in my lineup. I'm going to continue to stash Kyren Williams, though, right? Because he's the only running back that doesn't seem to be looked at negatively at this point by Sean McVay. So, yeah, I'm avoiding this whole backfield. And Cooper Kupp, he's also back in practice. He got limited in on Thursday, and he should be good to go for this week as well.
Yeah, that's about as much as you need to know about this backfield. Just avoid it. Like last year, you could say that, it's a good offense, so maybe one of them is due for a touchdown. It's like at this point, the offense isn't even that good. If it's a touchdown, it's going to be going to Cooper Kupp. So I think that, just avoid it 100%. Even if you had Darrell Henderson, it's not like he was doing any wonders for you in your lineup anyway. You thought you might have had something there, but you don't.
I'm going to hold on to Cam Akers just for a week and see how this backfield plays out. And if he doesn't do anything this week, if it continues to be a share, I'm just gonna drop him.
Yeah,
that's it. It's over. Austin Eckler had a limited practice due to an abdomen injury. Hopefully that's nothing too serious and he'll be able to play. Keep an eye on his practice status today. Let's say he's out this week, right? I'd probably play Sony Michel before I play Isaiah Spiller. Spiller's been inactive the entire year until this past week before their bye. And Michel, he got more run than him in their last game together. So, and that was Spiller's first touches of the season. So I hopefully Eckler's it They said that, it was just out of caution. So hopefully that is the case. Cowboys running back coach Skip Pete believes Tony Pollard maxes out at 30 weekly plays, which is absolutely terrible news right there for Pollard. Like he had the 3 touchdowns last week, but he didn't have an every down role. He was just like uber efficient with the touches that he had. And we can be happy with that production, right? In that 1 game sample. But for that to be sustainable, like as a high-end RB1 handcuff, like he needs more snaps if Zeke were to ever be out again for him to sustain that. And it's a blow to him, his value for the rest of the season, to be honest. Because if Zeke were to, like one of the reasons you're holding on to Tony Pollard is because if Zeke were to get hurt, he becomes an every down back for that offense. And obviously, he'll still be a good play, but he's not going to be a high-end RB1 play for me if Zeke were to be out.
I don't know. I'm not taking that too much to heart, that report or whatever. I'm not too worried about it because he, how many snaps did he play with Zeke out last week? Was it more than 30? Like, was it much more than 30?
Yes.
Yeah. So if he's not going to get that, which he hasn't, and he still put up that type of performance, we've seen how explosive he is. It's a wonder why they don't let him just handle the backfield, at this point. I don't think we're going to be able to see that this season, but maybe next season. But I'm not worried about it. The way he plays, his explosiveness, the home run capability, he has it regardless of how many touches he's getting. He doesn't need that many. He doesn't need as many as Zeke to produce the same way as Zeke. He's a much more dynamic talent. He can pass catch and he can run. He looks slippery between the tackles and on the outside. He's, quick to the edge. It's just good. He's a good player. So as long as he gets a couple touches, I think he's going to be fine. Especially if Zeke misses time, I'm starting him as a high-end RB1 each week. I mean, I don't heed that warning too much. I know that it might be a little bit concerning to hear, but if that's not what he's seen already, then what are we worried about?
Hard disagree on that one for me. Like I'm not somebody who depends on efficiency, right? Like
Right.
we saw it. We had a 1-game sample size with Zeke out, and he didn't get all the snaps. Only 50%, 55% of snaps. Like, dude, are you kidding me? And who did you compliment him with? Somebody I never heard of.
Malik Davis.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then on top of that,
I only know that because I'm a Cowboys fan.
right. And on top of that, after the game, you're like, yeah, well, that's where he maxes out at. And it's like they've truly look at him as a complement type of back, like not somebody who's not an every down guy. And sure, he had whatever it was, 15 carries, and he ended up with 3 touchdowns. But 15 carries is not going to get you 3 touchdowns every week. It might not even get you 1. Now, the good thing is that this is a relatively good offense, and there will be some goal line carries, and he'll get a goal line carry, sure.
Yeah.
But is he going to get you like 150 yards on 15 carries? He might get you on most weeks if he's given the full workload for a larger sample size of 5 or 6 games. Most games he's probably going to give you like 15 carries for 75 yards or 80 yards, and that's on the efficient side of things, right? If he's only averaging like 4 yards a carry in one of these games, he'll give you 60 yards, and you're hoping that he gets you a touchdown, right? So this is he ended up getting it done for you, and obviously you're going to have him in your lineup, but I'm not going to be playing him over these, other RB1s that are going to be getting 20 plus touches every single week.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't advocate for starting Tony. If Tony Pollard starts out, if Tony Pollard plays and Zeke is hurt, I wouldn't advocate starting him over any of our top 10, 12 guys. I mean, well, maybe the top 6 or 7, because I think that the upside is still there. Obviously it looks bad from an efficiency, a sustainability standpoint, because he was super efficient, but I think that's kind of his MO. He produces very well when he does, get the ball. That's all there is to it. They don't give him enough volume. That's the only thing that's holding it back for me. Even with the volume that he gets, he's played the past 3 weeks. He's had very similar workload in all of them. I think it was right around 14 opportunities in all of them. So, and that's with Zeke playing and without him playing. Obviously, without Zeke playing, he had his best output of the season. So I think that can continue if Zeke doesn't play again this week. But I expect Zeke back.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, I expect him back too. And it's crazy because without Zeke, he had 1 more touch.
Yeah. But
than the week
3
before.
more touchdowns.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and 3 more touchdowns. So like
Yeah.
what is more reliable, like in terms of data, like for future production? It's not touchdowns, right? It's the touches, it's the opportunity. So that's my issue now. And it's like, man, like this, it's super disappointing to hear that from me.
Well,
he was one of those guys. He was one of those guys that, like, if Zeke were to go down, like he was just gonna explode, whenever that happens. And he did end up exploding in that one game. But I did not rank him in my top 5, knowing that he was only going to get 50% of snaps. Because if he was only going to get 50% of snaps, I would have put him maybe as a low-end RB1, high-end RB2, if that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, if you zoom in with a microscope and look at that usage and say, yeah, then maybe we change that ranking. But I just, we saw this coming. We knew that if you get the touches, any more touches than he's been getting, which he didn't really, if he led the backfield, that he'd do well. And I think that we saw that. I think he's good for at least something close. I think he's going to be much closer to an explosive day if he plays and Zeke doesn't. Then he's going to be, than a quiet outing where he has like 6.5 points. It's not going to be a Damian Pierce type.
The best part about it is that he gets all the goal line looks, right? Like that's the best part. It's like, that is like the major upgrade right there when Zeke isn't in, right? Mm-hmm. So that's that part of it is the best part.
Yeah, because when Zeke is in, Zeke gets all the touches inside 10 yards. So it's like
he definitely gets the first crack at it.
Yeah,
for sure.
And if Tony Pollard's going to score a touchdown while Zeke is playing, it's going to have to come from 30, 40, 50 yards out. Yeah, that's the part that sucks.
All right, let's move on to Derrick Henry. He didn't practice yesterday because of a foot injury. Something to keep in mind. He says he's perfectly fine and that he'll be out there. But just so you know, the guy you want to play if he's out is Dontrell Hilliard. And, he would be a pretty good play against Kansas City if Derrick Henry were to be out for whatever reason. And it's a foot injury. Remember what injury Derrick Henry was out for all last season. So that's something to keep in mind and pay attention to today.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor still not practicing on Thursday. We talked about him ad nauseum this week, so I'm not going to talk about it too much more. But Deion Jackson would be the back to play in his place. Let's see if Jonathan Taylor ends up practicing today on Friday.
Right.
Chuba Hubbard has been ruled out. So it seems like they were really downplaying his ankle injury. That's 2 straight weeks that he's out now. It'll be Deontay Foreman once again, and he's going to be a solid RB2 play this week. If you saw yesterday's podcast, I moved him up like right ahead of, I think it was Mostert, right? So he would have been
I think he had him
like
RB 18. I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But as a mid RB2, solid RB2, he's a good play this week. A lot tougher matchup, right? But he should be okay and good to go. All right, let's move on to wide receiver rankings. We have Cooper Kupp at number 1, even though he's dealing with an ankle injury. It's a pretty good matchup out of the slot against the Bucs. He did practice in a limited fashion on Thursday, so he's good to go. He's going to be in my lineup, and I love him this week, regardless of the ankle injury.
Yeah,
I like Justin Jefferson a lot this week. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to say something about Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, it's just the Buccaneers defense. Earlier this season, I would have said that, this might be a tougher matchup for him, but the Buccaneers defense has been underperforming hugely. So I think that this is, even though he has the ankle injury, that might be the difference maker for me.
Yeah, no, it's true. And the Bucs have been pretty vulnerable out of the slot. Like if I'm looking at the numbers right now, Antoine Winfield lines the slot, and he's a good player, but the Bucs as a whole, they've been giving up the 9th most fantasy points to slot wide receivers. So not great when you're going up against Cooper Kupp. Not great. I like Justin Jefferson a lot this week, as you can tell. I have him here at number 2, right? And I have him ahead of Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle, who I have at 3, 4, and 5 respectively. They all have tougher matchups than usual, but Washington's perimeter defense stinks, and Justin Jefferson is going to be able to take advantage. If I had to guess, this is one of those blow-up games for Justin Jefferson. I think he has a higher chance of blowing up than Tyreek Hill, then Stephon Diggs, then Jalen Waddle, and that's the reason I have him here at number 2.
Right, and you have to think, you just look at it, he's had 2 relatively quiet games, these past 2 weeks after going for 30 points.
Due.
And he's due for it. And you look at his touchdowns, he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1, at least through the air. I think he hasn't scored a touchdown through the air since week 1.
Is that
he hasn't
true?
had a touchdown. Yeah, he hasn't had a single touchdown catch.
That.
So he's producing despite that. This is the spot for him to get right. He is due for some positive touchdown regression, just like AJ Brown was.
Dude,
Justin Jefferson's time is now.
It's gonna. How many touchdowns is he gonna score today? 4 or this week? 4. 4 touchdowns for Justin Jefferson this week. If AJ Brown can have 3 last week, I think Justin Jefferson's gonna have 4 this week.
Yeah, that positive regression is coming. So just keep starting him. Don't get disenchanted. Obviously, you wouldn't be anyway. He's been getting it done for you even without the touchdowns. But the serious upside is coming. This is the matchup for it to happen. It's Washington.
If he has 4 touchdowns on Sunday, right? He's playing on Sunday, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If he has 4 touchdowns on Sunday, then he's going to have 6 touchdowns through 8 games played, which is pretty doable for Justin Jefferson. If you say it like that, you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I think
you don't think it's 4?
I don't think 4. I'm not necessarily going to project 4, but I will say he's definitely going over 100 yards receiving. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes over 150. And then, a touchdown or 2. I think 2 touchdowns is very well within his range. Like I said, he is due for that kind of game. Obviously, they just added TJ Hawkinson, so I'm not sure. I don't think he's going to be pulling targets away from Justin Jefferson because Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson. But I've been, keeping tabs on Justin Jefferson these past few weeks, and when is he going to get that touchdown? It has to happen at some point. I think it could be this week.
That was really hard to believe when you said that. I had to look it up. I'm like,
right. It felt weird saying it because I was like, I looked at the game log. I'm like, this can't be right. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, it has to be right. So I said it. And then you were visibly surprised. I was like, oh, crap. Is that actually not right? But no, he did have that 1 touchdown on the ground a couple of weeks ago. So that's why it might not feel like it's been that long.
Right.
But in terms of receiving touchdowns, he is well overdue.
Very interesting. Okay. I have Amon-Ra St. at number 6. Keep in mind that at the end of the year last year, when he was going off, he was without TJ Hawkinson. He didn't have a healthy DeAndre Swift. And we're seeing some shades of that right now with Hawkinson being traded away. And, Amon-Ra, he was going to do his thing regardless. But without TJ Hawkinson there, you got to think he's going to the moon.
Yeah. And obviously, we've been high on Amon-Ra St. Brown, talking about him. We've had him ranked here, I think, in the top like 7 or 8, the past how many weeks every time that he's healthy. We know what he can be. He just hasn't gotten there yet. He's still coming back from the injury, I think. And, the Lions offense has been, on a bit of a going through a rough patch these past few weeks. Green Bay is in a very much nicer matchup, but I think that if anyone's going to get it done through the air, it's going to be him, especially with TJ Hawkinson out. Well, not out, but he's gone.
Yeah.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, like you said, when he was doing his thing, you said it was without TJ Hawkinson, check. DeAndre Swift was banged up, check. Jared Goff was still quarterback, check, presumably. So I think that, better days are ahead for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It just has to happen. He has to get over that hump because that injury, I'm not sure if it's still bothering him, but he hasn't been producing the same way. But even last week, it wasn't a bad performance. So at least you have something to build on.
Still had 24%, 26% target share. Josh Reynolds also a little bit banged up as well, so keep that in mind.
Right.
Regardless, you're going to have him in your lineup. AJ Brown, I had him at number 7. I have Devontae Adams at number 8 against Jacksonville, looking for a bounce back from him. He had the flu last week. It was a good matchup for him. No Marshawn Lattimore. He couldn't come through because Derek Carr stinks. And now he's going up against the Jacksonville defense, who has been shutting down receivers on that left side. And not saying Adams can be shut down, but just saying last week would have been a nice week to come through.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
More than one
DeAndre Hopkins.
Awesome.
And what could have been. Derek Carr, you stink.
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins at 9. A lot tougher of a matchup this week for Hopkins. Like last week, like look what he did 2 weeks ago, right? Against the Saints without Marshawn Lattimore. Great matchup. The Saints were already giving up a ton of fantasy points to wide receivers.
Yeah.
And then this past week, like you couldn't ask for a better matchup against Minnesota, especially where he lines up on that left side. And now against the Seattle defense, who has been relatively good against perimeter wide receivers, they've been giving up the 3rd least fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers this year. I'm tempering expectations for DeAndre Hopkins this week. I might seem like a DeAndre Hopkins hater. I can totally understand. Like that might.
Yeah.
I'm not a hater. DeAndre Hopkins is actually one of my favorite players in the NFL. Like I like players like him. Like when I saw that Hard Knocks clip, when what wasn't even a clip, I saw it when it was on TV. Like him against what was it, D'Angelo Hall? Is that who it was?
Was it when they were the Redskins still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
D'Angelo Hall?
It might have been. I feel like it has to have been. I mean, he's been in the league a while, but
and like he was basically like, he was messing with him in practice, and he's like, dude, like, don't test me right now. He's like, I only fear God, homie. And like it was a wrap. And then they went 1-on-1. And I think it was D'Angelo Hall. I'm gonna keep saying it, and it might not be the guy. Like somebody in the comments needs to correct me if I'm wrong, but or confirm that it was D'Angelo Hall. And then he just like messed up his ankle, and he was like out like, for a while. And it was just embarrassing. So ever since then, he's been my guy. I'm not DeAndre Hopkins hater. Just want to say that. Just temper expectations a little bit this week.
Yeah, I don't think you're a hater. I think the way he's performed, coming back, obviously, he wasn't injured or anything, but the way he's performed, he's just, integrated directly right back into the offense, and the way he's produced, I don't think anybody saw this kind of production coming. 19 points, 33 points. The target share there, he's been getting 14 targets, 13 targets the past 2 weeks, double-digit receptions in both games and a touchdown, to boot last week in a good matchup. He's checked every box that you wanted him to check coming back that maybe we didn't think it was going to happen this fast. So I think he might be due for a little negative regression. Obviously 33 points, it looked really good. And he looks like he's going to continue to be a big part of this offense. But like you said, in a matchup like this, it was a little low scoring last time. I don't anticipate that being the case again this time. But I think that at some point, he's going to have that game where people can be like, okay, maybe he's not 100%, the wide receiver one that we want him to be on this offense just yet. Because the offense has been a little bit shaky, at least in Arizona. And he's been producing despite it being relatively shaky. So I think that it could happen this week that he has a rougher game.
DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett from that same game. I have them at 10 and 11. They're seemingly both like quote unquote healthy. They both got full practices in. That's great. I love Terry McLaurin this week, by the way. Like I have Mike Evans, by the way, at number 12. I have T. Higgins at 13. I love Terry McLaurin this week against Minnesota. We saw, we just talked about DeAndre Hopkins against them last week, but the Vikings are giving up the most fantasy points to the left side of the perimeter and the slot. over the last 4 weeks. And that's where Terry runs 75% of his routes from. He's also gotten 26% and 28% target share in the last 2 games with Taylor Heineke this year. And Preciser also is predicting Minnesota to lose by 8 points in this game, which means they're going to be in a negative game script, which means a lot of passing late in the game, which means a lot of garbage time potential here. And that's what we want to hear. And this is a good time to shout out the sponsor of today's episode, Preciser.
All right.
Preciser uses data-driven analytics and algorithms to make game predictions to help you make better bets, better start-sit decisions, and make better DFS lineups. I'll have the link in the description, but you can check them out at preciser.io/prediction. And make sure to use the code UPPERHAND to get 30% off their first 3 months of their pro package. Then it ends up coming out to only $6.99 a month to get all their data. They have a free package as well if you don't want to commit, but make sure you use the code UPPERHAND when you do sign up. Are you with me on Terry McLaurin? This is pretty high.
Yeah.
14.
But I'm much happier with Terry McLaurin in my lineup, with Taylor Heineke at quarterback than I was with Carson Wentz. Because Carson Wentz, he was distributing the ball, but he wasn't really throwing it Terry McLaurin's way. Taylor Heineke came right back in, and he has revived Terry McLaurin. You know what I'm saying? Like, he looks like a much better, not necessarily a much better receiver, but in terms of a much better fantasy player with Taylor Heineke at quarterback. Because Heineke knows if you have a guy like Terry McLaurin, you throw it to him. You don't just avoid him. You don't throw him the ball. You throw it to Terry McLaurin. And he looked really good the past 2 weeks, with Taylor Heineke at quarterback. That's really the main difference for me. I think that's what makes him, a decent start now. I think 14 is a good spot to have him. It might be a little bit high for my taste just yet. I know that, you talked about the Vikings allowing the most points to the slot and on the left side. And that's where Terry McLaurin runs his routes. Washington's offense, I'm still a little bit, leery. This is going to be a test. If the Vikings go up, it might be a negative game script. I think the Washington should be able to keep it competitive, though. They might be able to keep the ground game in play. I do ultimately think Minnesota is going to win this game, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer than we think. It's not going to be a complete negative game script for Terry McLaurin. It's just going to be, running deep routes all day. And Taylor Heineke is going to be taking shots all day.
Yeah, I and that's another reason why I like him, because Minnesota has been one of the best teams against the run, and I don't think Washington's going to be able to establish any sort of run game against them. They've already been inefficient in the run game this season, so that's another reason why I just think that they're going to be able to shut down the run, and then they're going to have to pass the ball.
Is Terry McLaurin your start of the week? Would you say?
Yes.
Terry McLaurin
is the start of the week. There you go.
All right. There it is. Last time we had a start of the week on here, Amari Cooper put up 3 points.
First start of the week also. Chris Olave. By the way, that was your start of the week.
Yes, it was. So
right,
we'll see. We'll see if it's the upper hand fantasy curse or if it's just my curse. You know what I'm
saying? Chris Olave at number 15, and this might be a little bit surprising to have McLaurin above Chris Olave this week. But Baltimore has gotten a lot better against perimeter wide receivers, and Olave has been good. But here are his target numbers over the last 4 weeks: 7, 6, 14, 7. Okay, so will this be a game where he sees close to 10 targets or not? Will this game be a game where they have to claw back? I don't know, right? Baltimore is missing a lot of pieces, so this might be a game where they don't have to necessarily air it out, and this could be a game where Alvin Kamara gets a bunch of run. So I'm not really looking at this game as a game where Chris Olave is going to get 10 plus targets. I love Christian Kirk at 15 against the Raiders this week. The Raiders are not good against slot wide receivers. They continually give up points to that position. So Christian Kirk got a bunch of target share last week. I'm with it. I like Christian Kirk this week. Michael Pittman at 17. Devontae Smith I had at 18. Michael Pittman, by the way, even though a lot of his targets were short, Michael Pittman still got 39% target share last week, which is absolutely ridiculous. So don't worry about him. Start him. This is not necessarily such a bad matchup either. The Patriots have allowed some wide receivers to get some points, so this isn't too bad for Michael Pittman. There are a lot worse matchups out there, so don't worry about his low, quote unquote, low output last week. He got the targets, he got the receptions, and that depth of target can increase moving forward.
The only thing that Michael Pittman has working against him is that, Bill Belichick defenses tend to eat young quarterbacks for breakfast. We'll see how Sam Ehlinger fares. But what I saw from Sam Ehlinger, it doesn't look like it's going to be a case where he's going to be totally incompetent. As long as the offense, we'll see if Jonathan Taylor plays. I think that would help them a lot. Give him someone to lean on in the run game. I don't think it's going to be, a shutout type of day, even though they did do that to the Lions a couple of weeks ago. This offense is, they have enough playmakers that they should be able to get things done. Between Michael Pittman, Alec Pearson now, Paris Campbell's kind of come on. So I think that he should be fine. It's going to be another day like we've seen, I think, these past 2 weeks. I don't like his ceiling too much, Michael Pittman, but I think that he has a nice enough floor as the primary target for Sam Ehlinger. I mean, he's a veteran. Sam Ehlinger is going to be targeting him pretty much most of at a similar clip as he's been. He's been targeting him a lot because who else is there to target outside of him? With the weapons that they have, they're relatively young. So I like Michael Pittman.
Devontae Smith at number 18. That's where I had him. Didn't really come through, but I had him ahead of Chris Godwin because Chris Godwin, this might be a little bit of a tough matchup for him depending on where Jalen Ramsey lines up this week. Like, is he going to line up in the slot against Chris Godwin? Is he going to line up on the outside against Mike Evans? It could be a little bit of both. We'll see. But Godwin's efficiency hasn't been amazing. Like, he's been getting a lot of targets closer to the line of scrimmage, right? So, he's taking a little bit of a hit, but he's a great talent, and I want him in my lineup. And then I have DJ Moore at number 20. DJ Moore, he has also come along, and maybe this might be too low for DJ Moore. However, I'm a little concerned about the matchup this week.
Yeah.
But in terms of like what he's been doing, like DJ Moore over the last 2 games, what was his let's see, I'm trying to find his target share. Yeah, 30%, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it's up there.
10 and 11 targets, the past
11 targets, and not just that, like catchable targets now. Like, that's the main difference. I don't know if you saw the video. Who posted this? Oh, it was DraftKings Sportsbook. Tweeted out a picture, a video of Baker Mayfield. Like how they had those like nets that you throw the ball into.
I saw this one. Yeah.
And he just completely misses it. And the caption from their Twitter handle was like, Baker Mayfield, season is upon us, or something like that. And it's just like, it's so bad.
I saw the same thing. I forget where it was. It was like another Baker Mayfield dime. It's like, yeah.
It was so bad, man. But you know what? DJ Moore is a lot more playable now. Tough matchup against Cincinnati, but they did lose Chidobe Iwozie to a season-long injury. So, there is a little bit of hope for Moore to do his thing.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to go ahead.
If he's working against Eli Apple, I like his odds.
I agree. And by the way, I just want to, say something about his teammate, somebody that you might have forgotten about. That's Terrace Marshall. I'd pick him up. If you have a deep league, you have a bench spot, pick him up this week because he was a 2nd-round pick last year. This coaching staff is gone. For whatever reason, they didn't like him. He came through last week in a very good matchup, but he did see a very high target share. And he's a guy who played with Joe Burrow at LSU. He played with Justin Jefferson. He played with Jamar Chase, and he still put up numbers. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Pick him up. He's a rookie that I liked a lot going into last year. He had a very good preseason. For whatever reason, he fell down the pecking order to the point where this coaching staff just didn't want to play him. All of a sudden, he gets playing time and he starts producing. So, something to keep an eye on. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving forward, Juju Smith-Schuster at number 21. I obviously they just traded for Kadarius Toney, but it might take a little bit for Kadarius Toney to implement himself into the offense. They are working him in apparently, but Juju, this is a good matchup against Tennessee, so I'm good starting Juju as a low-end wide receiver 2 this week. Go to Tyler Boyd as well. He didn't have the best game in the world last week, but Carolina has been really, hasn't been great against slot wide receivers. And, don't get too discouraged by what Tyler Boyd did last week. He still caught a touchdown. So it's very possible that we see a much better game for both Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins this week.
Yeah, I think that both Bengals receivers are going to be fine. This is a good matchup. We've seen the Bengals offense has kind of been bipolar, the season so far. Either they're way on or they're way off. And they still got it done, both Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, with the offense not being as, dialed in as they usually are, or at least as they had been. I don't know if that's how you say it.
That is how you say it.
Yeah, so that's how you say it. But if they're not as dialed in as they were those 2 weeks where Joe Burrow was just popping off. But I think that he has a nice enough floor, with Jamar Chase out, that he should be, starting regardless of the matchup. This one I think could go a lot more their way, because the defense was torn apart by Demir Bird last week.
There you go. And Jameer Byrd, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he caught the touchdown. Like when he lined up out of the slot. Something to note. Rondell Moore at 23 also lines up out of the slot, and Seattle has been a little bit more vulnerable to slot wide receivers than perimeter wide receivers. So I like him this week. Curtis Samuel, very similar reasons I talked about Terry McLaurin. That also applies to Curtis Samuel because he runs a lot of his routes, almost all of his routes out of the slot. And Minnesota has been the worst team against slot wide receivers over the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So Curtis Samuel, great start this week. Gabriel Davis, the Jets have been pretty tough against perimeter wide receivers, right? And it's going to be super, super interesting to see Sauce Gardner against Stephon Diggs this week. He doesn't shadow, he stays on his side, but whenever Stephon Diggs is on that side, it's going to be interesting. DJ Reed on the other side also playing out of his mind this year. So a little bit tougher matchup, but you got to put him in your lineup. You never know, right? This is Josh Allen, the Bills offense we're talking about. So Continue to start Gabe Davis. If it gives you, a 5-point game, it is what it is. The good thing about Gabe Davis is last week, guess what? He had a high target share game. He did. So, Gabe Davis with a 30% target share game after target shares of 9%, 18%, and 14%. So it's good to hear. That's some good news right there.
Gabe Davis is just going to live in this 21 to 25 column.
Always.
That's where he's going to be. Because that's his floor, and also it's the perfect middle ground between the ceiling and the floor. Because the floor is way off this list, but the ceiling is at the top of the list. So
yeah, and not his actual fantasy floor, because his actual fantasy point floor is 0. But like in terms of the rankings, it's going to be right around here. And the only reason why he's a little bit low, honestly, because he has a tougher matchup, and all the guys above him right here have a good matchup this week.
Right.
I have Josh Palmer at number 26. No Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. Josh Palmer going up against Atlanta, you probably want to have him in your lineup. This is a very good, I'm like, listen, like I lost Keenan Allen in the league, and I picked up with DeAndre Carter, and I'm starting him. Okay, so like that tells you what you need to know about Josh Palmer.
Somebody has to catch the ball.
Someone got to catch the ball
for the Chargers. Yeah, someone has to catch the ball.
Exactly.
And Gerald Everett, I think we have him a little bit higher in rankings this week. We'll get to him, but he's kind of the guy that I think you should be starting. Definitely.
We will. And we're going to get into tight end rankings right now. Just going to finish off wide receivers. 27, I have Adam Thielen, followed by Romeo Doubs. But keep in mind, Allen Lazard might play this week. So if he does, then I'm switching Romeo Doubs and Allen Lazard pretty much. That's what I'm going to do. Devin Duvernay at 29, Jacoby Myers at 30. That's who I'm rolling with there. Let's move on to tight ends real quick. We got Travis Kelce at number 1, followed by Isaiah Likely at number 2. And this is obviously assuming that Mark Andrews is out. And the reason why I did it like this is because, like, you obviously are playing Mark Andrews, and you might not have known who to play Isaiah Likely over if Mark Andrews was out. And this is what I would do. I'll play Travis Kelce first, followed by Isaiah Likely over everybody else.
Yeah.
I had Zach Ertz at number 3 in a great matchup against Seattle. And I had Dallas Goedert at 4, but he might end up as a tight end 1 this week with 100 yards and a touchdown. And as you mentioned, Gerald Everett at number 5, right? He's going to take advantage of the fact that there's no Keenan Allen and no Mike Williams.
And he's been doing his thing, on his own, even with one or both of them playing. Obviously, for most of the season, it's been just Mike Williams, but he's been getting enough looks. We pinned him for the upside early this offseason and through the offseason, and he's kind of returned on that. He should be a good start for you. He's been a good start for you the past, at least a few weeks out of the season so far already. So I think that he's a really nice start this week.
100%. Tyler Higbee at number 6. Here, Evan Ingram at number 7. Evan Ingram's been getting it done, over the past several weeks, and his floor has been around like 10 PPR points, double-digit points. So for a tight end, I'll take that, and he's going up against Vegas, and that's a really, really good matchup. Tyler Higbee also has a good matchup as well against Tampa Bay. I have Kyle Pitts in the top 10, believe it or not, but that's only because there's no other tight ends that I want to play over him. Darren Waller, super disappointing. Who knows if he's even going to play this week? And then Taysom Hill I have at number 10, who got a bunch of carries last week. And Mark Ingram is banged up. Like, he's going to be out for a while with I think it's an MCL injury. So Taysom Hill could be the backup right now to Alvin Kamara.
Right. Nobody knows how Taysom Hill is going to be used on a weekly basis. 1 week he'll be throwing it, 1 week he'll be catching it, 1 week he's rushing it. So yeah, Taysom Hill, he's a nice tight end. He's a tight end 6 right now, I think, on the season, which is funny to think about because
Unbelievable.
it's just
Unbelievable.
a lot of it's off of that one performance. But still, he's been just as reliable as other tight ends, albeit in non-conventional ways. It's like getting the football.
We have Hayden Hurst here at number 11. He's a solid streamer this week, but the matchup is okay. Tyler Conklin, with Corey Davis out and Elijah Moore in the doghouse, he's been getting a lot more routes, and he had a big game last week, so he's a solid streamer against Buffalo. Even though it's a little bit of a tough matchup. Robert Tonyan has a great matchup against Detroit, so he's a solid streamer. I have him at number 13. I have TJ Hawkinson at 14 just because, whatever, like what the heck, just put him in there and see how he does. Who knows if he's going to get a full complement of routes? Probably not in his first week back. But honestly, I'll have him in my lineup before Cade Otton, who I have at 15, Mike Gesicki, Dawson Knox, Noah Fant, who, by the way, also has a good matchup against Arizona, just in case you wanted to, a little bit of a dart throw for a touchdown. It's either him or what's his name? Who's the tight end too again? Will Dissly, right?
Yes.
Either of those guys. Will Dissly probably has a better chance of catching a touchdown than Noah Fant, to be honest. And then Juwan Johnson at number 19, followed by Hunter Henry. And that's it.
Yep.
That's all we got today, guys. You guys have a good weekend. Zach, appreciate you, man. Thanks to everyone who has been listening to the podcast. We really appreciate you guys. As always, I'm going to end the podcast every single time by thanking you guys because it's because of you guys that this podcast has been doing pretty well lately. So let's keep it going. Good luck this weekend. I'll be live on Sunday in the morning before the games, and I'll see you then. Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.